Welcome to a special edition. Hello and welcome to a special edition of AstroLunaChick's Guide to the Universe. I am Susan, aka AstroLunaChick, and I'm here to talk about Sagittarius today on this Monday, December 5th, 2022, in the season of Sagittarius. I thought it might be interesting to talk about the constellation of Sagittarius, which is also known as the Archer. And I'm going to read from two of my favorite places, my favorite references for the stars and the zodiac. One of them is the website constellationofwords.com. And there you can find all of the constellations. And there is a list of the fixed stars also. And it's a really wonderful resource. I've been using this for years, and I love it. I love it because it goes so deep into the history and the ancient astrology, and the stories behind the constellations. So if you're interested in this, you can go and check it out yourself. The website constellationofwords.com. So I'm going to read a little bit from that website about the constellation of Sagittarius. And then I'm going to read from a book called Meditations on the Signs of the Zodiac. And this book was written by John Jocelyn and was published in 1970 by Rudolf Steiner Publications. And it's one of the most interesting books in terms of, again, the meaning, the symbology, and from a spiritual perspective. He's writing from a Christian mystical perspective. So he does reference the Bible a lot. So I think it's a very nice reference when I like to go a little bit deeper into the meanings behind the constellations. So let's get started. Constellation of Words, the website. And when I pull up the reference on Sagittarius, this page talks about the stars, the history of the constellation. And what I love about this website is that it goes into the etymology behind the stars, the names of the constellation, and all of that. So here we go. So regarding Sagittarius, clues to the meaning of this celestial feature. An arrow is a pointed projectile that is shot with a bow and penetrates a distant target. Sagitta is the constellation of the arrow, and Sagittarius is the constellation of the bow or archer. The constellation of Aquila separates these two constellations. The English word arrow, constellation Sagitta, is confounded with the archer Sagittarius and cognate with Latin arcus, bow, arch. The English word sagitta, arrow, is also confounded with the word Sagittarius, the archer or arrow shooter. The word archer comes from the Indo-European root arcu, which means bow and arrow, uncertain which, perhaps both as a unit, derivatives, arrow, arc, arcade, arch, archer, arbalest, archivolt, archiform, arcurate, from Latin arcus, bow. The arrow, sagitta, is the name for its keen striking, that is, swift striking. The word sagax of sagacticus should belong to the constellation of Sagittarius rather than Sagitta, the archer, from Latin sagere, to seek to know. The key words for Sagittarius is I seek. The Latin sagax comes from the Indo-European root sag, to seek out. Derivatives, seek, beseech, sake, forsake, ramshackle, ransack, presage. These words from Latin sagere, to perceive, seek, to know. Sagacious from sagax, of keen perception. Exegesis, hegemony from Greek hegesthai, to lead, to track down, to set upon, attack, usually used as a command to a dog. Sick balls, chapper. There is an etymology relationship between the words sick and Latin sagere above. The word sick, to set upon, attack, is usually used as a command to a dog. Jupiter rules this constellation, but it also was the domicile or under the protection of Artemis, Diana, the huntress, who is often portrayed with a bow and arrow. In Greek mythology, Artemis, Diana, sicked a pack of dogs on Actaeon. The Greeks called this constellation Toxotis, the archer, from toxon, bow. Modern archers are known as toxophilites or bow lovers. Toxophily is the sport of archery. The word taxus, the yew genus, and the Latin word for yew, is of the same origin as Greek toxon, bow. In Europe, bows were mostly made from yew, and English bows in particular were invariably cut from yew trees. Greek toxicon, neuter of the adjective toxikos, means arrow poison, and poisons smeared on arrows were fired from bows. Toxa or toxon, derived from the yew tree. Our verb intoxicate originally meant to poison. The 17th century herbalist Nicholas Culpeper said of yew toxins, "It is the most active vegetable poison known in the whole world, for in small dose it instantly induces death." The constellation had the titles Crotus and Croton. Crotus was a rustic spirit or satyr who consorted with the Muses on Mount Helicon. The Muses were the 9 daughters of Mnemosyne and Zeus, each of whom presided over a different art or science. Crotus was a great hunter, and, according to some, the inventor of the hunting bow and the rhythmic beat which accompanied music. The Muses rewarded him with a place among the stars and as the constellation Sagittarius. Mortals who were made immortal, Crotos, son of Pan and Eupheme, the well-spoken, was put in the sky by muses as Sagittarium, according to Hyginus in Fabulae 224. The constellation Sagittarius the Archer, some say that he is Crotus, son of Eupheme, nurse of the Musae. As Sisyphus, writer of tragedies, says he had in his home on Mount Helicon and took his pleasure in the company of the muses, sometimes following the pursuit of hunting. He attained great fame for his diligence, for he was swift in the woods and clever in the arts. As a reward for his zeal, the Musae asked Jove, aka Zeus, to represent him in some star group, and Jove did so. Since he wished to display all his skills in one body, he gave him horse flanks because he rode a great deal. He added arrows, since these would show both his keenness and his swiftness, and he gave him a satyrus's tail because the Musae took no less pleasure in Crotus than Liber, in parentheses Dionysus, did in the Satyrae. Before his feet are a few stars arranged in a circle, which some said were a wreath thrown off as by one at play. So here we are looking at the themes of hunting, of the bow and arrow, right? We're talking about the satyrs, part man, part horse. And what else can we gain from the etymology here? So the Greek and Roman, let's see, in etymology, coming from Crotos, as Crotos was referenced before. Crotos was the inventor of the rhythmic beat which accompanied music. It was also said that when he listened to the timeless performances of the muses, he expressed his delight by striking or clapping his hands. Crotalum or crotalos was an ancient Greek and later Roman instrument similar to castanets or clappers and used to accompany dancing. Greek krotos, the sound of rattling, beating, striking, or clapping, which whence also crotein, to cause to rattle, to knock, beat, strike, clap. So we get Crotalus, the genus of consisting of rattlesnakes, from Greek crotalos, rattle, crotoxin, a crystalline neurotoxin found in the venom of rattlesnakes, dicrotism, an anomaly of the pulse, condition in which the pulse is felt as 2 beats per single heartbeat. Tricrotism, 3 beats of the pulse per single heartbeat. Acrotic is the absence of pulse. What else do we have from this root? Also comes crotaphenon, crotapheon. The tip of the greater wing of the sphenoid bone, a point in craniometry. Crotaphos side of forehead or the temple of the head, properly meaning the place of beating. So we're seeing also parts of the body, the concept of the beating of a drum, keeping time, rattling, striking, clapping, and then weaving into it the heartbeat and the pulse. The beat of the pulse is a sign of life. The philosopher Heraclitus commented on how the name of the bow, bios, is associated with life, bios, with a different accent on the vowels. So it's bios with the accent on the O and bios accent on the I. And said the bow has the name bios, life, its work is death. Greek bios is the word for life, related to Latin vita, life, from the Indo-European root gue, to live. Okay, super deep. So in astrology, it goes on, the zodiacal sign Sagittarius or its ruling planet Jupiter governs the liver. It is said that Sagittarians have an active, sensitive liver that constantly suffers from overuse of alcohol, intoxication, and susceptible to hepatitis. The liver removes toxins from the blood. The English words liver and life derive from the Indo-European root leap, L-E-I-P, to stick, adhere, fat. Liposuction comes to mind. Sagittarius has always been a sign associated with shooting for far off goals. An arrow is shot with a bow. The constellation of Sagittarius was the German Schütze, Schütz. The Anglo-Saxon had Scytta, that's Scytta, a manuscript of 1386 calling it the Shatter. Shoot comes from the Indo-European word skewed, to shoot, chase, throw. Derivatives: shoot, shot, shout, shuttle, scuttle. The word Scythia means shooter, archer, and it ultimately derived from the Proto-Indo-European skewed, to shoot, throw. Scythians or Scyths were a nation of horse-riding nomadic pastoralists. Arrows are made from the offshoots of or cuttings of trees, the shooting of which would have caused some of the shots to have taken root in more distant places other than their usual environment. Some of these words might belong to Sagitta, the arrow, because for both arrows and cuttings, for planting, the young shoots representing the current season's growth are used. The previous season's growth are favored for making bows. The constellation represents Crotus, who consorted with the Muses. Muse from men to think, maybe Delphinus, the 9 sisters who embody 9 talents or 9 facets of the mind. When Pythagoras arrived at Croton, his first advice to the Crotoniates was to build a shrine to the Muses at the center of the city to promote civic harmony and learning. Sagittarius traditionally rules the 9th house of the zodiac. This is the house the ancients refer to as the house of the higher mind and belief systems. In Cratylus by Plato, Hermogenes asks, "What do you think of doxa, opinion, and that class of words?" And Socrates answered, "Doxa is either derived from doxias, pursuit, and expresses the march of the soul in the pursuit of knowledge, or from the shooting of a bow, toxon. The latter is more likely and is confirmed by oasis, thinking, which is only oasis. Okay, so they're spelled differently. OIESIS, thinking, which is only oasis, OISIS, moving, and implies the movement of the soul to the essential nature of each thing, just as boule, BOULE, counsel, has to do with shooting, bowl, BOLE, and boulestai, to wish, combines the notion of aiming and deliberating. All these words seem to follow doxa, and all involve the ideas of shooting, just as abulia, absence of counsel, on the other hand, is a mishap, or missing, or mistaking of the mark, or aim, or proposal, or object. It goes on. Doxa comes from the Indo-European root dec, to take, accept. Derivatives, descent, which is from Latin desere, to be fitting, to be acceptable. Wait, so that's decent, not descent. Decent, from Latin desere, to be fitting, to be acceptable. Docent, docile, doctor, doctrine, document. These words from Latin docere, to teach, to cause to accept. Documentary, endocrine glands, which are ductless glands capable of providing bursts of energy. Dogmatic, doxology, heterodox, orthodox, paradox. These words from Greek dokein. Decor, decorate, from Latin decus, grace, ornament, to be appropriate, to be suitable. Decorous, dainty, deign, dignity, condign, dignified, disdain, indine, indignant, indignation. These words from dignus, worthy, Latin, dignus, worthy, deserving, fitting, dignitary, discipline, disciple. These words from discere, to learn, dowel, pandect. Pandect is a complete body of laws, a legal code. So you can see here, as it goes very detailed into the etymology behind the meaning of where we get our associations with the constellation of Sagittarius. All of these things that we're talking about, like indoctrination, and which is why we associate Sagittarius with doctrine, right? So that's where we get the association of Sagittarius with religion and belief systems, legal systems, legal doctrines, legal codes. Yeah. And also interesting when it talks about the idea of shooting, right? And missing the mark, right? And sin being missing the mark, the concept of sin. So what else can we get from this? If we go back to the Sumerians, we have a reference on this page to the Sumerians. Let's see, they're quoting from, where are they quoting from? All right, well, it's not clear who they're quoting from with this, but it could be from Manilus. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, I'm just going to read from the website here, this page on Sagittarius. So, quote, from the Sumerians, who invented the first written Western language, we find references to the Mesopotamian god Enki masturbating, his ejaculation filling the Tigris River with flowing water. Tigris, Arrow River, Sagitta. Sagitta might also be the penis. So the arrow, the phallus, they're linking in the reference to the arrow being a phallic symbol. Tigers only drink from flowing water and won't drink from still waters. The star Nunki, the Sigma star of Sagittarius, is identified with Enki. Of Enki, Sumerian god of waters and most ancient city of Eridu, Jaculum was one title for Sagitta. Jaculum and ejaculate are both derived from Latin ejaculum, meaning a dart. There might be a correlation between the releasing of arrows from a bow and releasing semen. In astrology, Sagittarius rules the region around the hips, gluteus muscles, thighs, along with the liver. The ancient, extinct Indo-European language of the Hittites and in Anatolia had the word saguta for thighs and hips, which shows how languages change over the centuries. This constellation depicts a centaur shooting from an arrow from a bow, the upper body down to the waist of that of a man, and his hip and thigh regions are part of the horse. Hippos, Hippos, is the Greek word for a horse, which may not just be coincidental. The astrological influences of the constellation given by Manilus, quote, as for the archer, when the foremost portion of his cloak rises, he will give birth to hearts renowned in war and will conduct the conqueror, celebrating great triumphs in the sight of all, to his countrymen's citadels. Such a one will build high walls one moment and pull them down in the next. But if fortune favors them too generously with success, the mark of her envy is to be seen on their faces, for she works cruel havoc upon their features. So was it that the dread warrior paid for his victories at the Trebia, Cannae, and the lake, even before the hour of his retreat, with such disfigurement. Translator's note, Hannibal, who lost an eye. Sagittarius is a one-eyed. See page 103, Manilus, blah, blah, blah. And also, quoting from, Manilis, both of these, quoting from Manilis Astronomica, what I just read, and this paragraph. Quote, but they whose lot it is to be born under the centaur of double form delight in yoking a team, in bringing a fiery horse to obey the pliant reins, in following herds which graze all over the grasslands, and imposing a master on every kind of quadruped and taming them. They soften tigers, rid the lions of his fierceness, speak to the elephant, and through speech adapt its huge bulk to human skills in a variety of displays. Indeed, the stars of this constellation, Indeed, in the stars of this constellation, the human form is blended with a beast and placed above it, wherefore it has lordship over beasts. And because it carries a shaft poised on a drawn bow, and it imparts strength to limb and keenness to the intellect, swiftness of movement, and a defatigable spirit. So getting the essence of the zodiac sign and the constellation of Sagittarius, in the essence of it, of higher learning, exploration, and how it rules over large game, like horses and cattle and big game hunting, wild beasts and such, tigers. So that gives us a little bit of background on the etymology, where this all comes from. Also the governance of Sagittarius, the sign of Sagittarius, and Jupiter as its ruling planet on certain parts of the body, of the liver, right? The hips and thighs. So, it's interesting when we think about Sagittarius, we think about excess, right? And so it's not surprising that it's associated with the excess use of alcohol, and how that is associated with the liver, right? Intoxication, as the liver is the organ that removes the toxins from the blood, and intoxication is being over toxified to the point where your liver can't flush it out. So seeing all of these things that the sign of, or the constellation of Sagittarius is associated with, it's also associated with music, hunting, music, rhythmic beat, poisons, toxins, and the cultivation, in terms of taking clippings, let's say, from a plant or a tree, taking a clipping of the new growth and rooting it to use the offshoot to have a new planting, clippings from a new plant from the clippings. So and the association with the beat of the drum and the beat of the heart and the pulse being a sign of life. These are the associations of Sagittarius with the life force. Signs of life being pulse. Anyway, all very interesting. And you can go and read up on that. I won't go through the fixed stars that are associated with the constellation, but if you want to read more, what I just read was the whole page regarding the page for the constellation of Sagittarius on the website Constellation of Words. So it does lead, there are links to the fixed stars so you can see what are the most important stars, prominent stars, and the history of the constellation. You can see what degrees of the zodiac. For instance, I'll just give you one. Sun Nunki is one that was mentioned in what I just read. What else? Guess that's the most prominent star, Nunki. So the star Nunki is in the constellation Sagittarius, but located at the zodiacal degree of 12 degrees 23 minutes of Capricorn. That's its longitude. So yeah, so check that out, constellationofwords.com. And I'm also going to read from a Kindle book that I have, Meditations on the Signs of the Zodiac. And I've enjoyed this book tremendously. Usually when we go from one season to the next, like we're in Sagittarius season, I love to read this as a refresher to myself, just to get a sense and meditate on the essence of the sign of the season that we're in. So I'm going to read from this book, Meditations on the Signs of the Zodiac by John Jocelyn. Sagittarius the Archer. Sagittarius the Archer is the sign that beckons to higher places and to higher realms. It produces experts at adventure and ardent aspirants to the spirit of truth. To Sagittarians, life opens out as a journey towards a distant, though definite goal. This ninth sign of the zodiac is the third and last of the fiery triplicity, giving fiery enthusiasm. In this third common sign, as in the other three signs, common signs, there takes place the development of thought for use in this life or in a future incarnation. Sagittarius is aptly symbolized by a figure that is half horse and half man, the man aiming his arrow towards the sky. This indicates the man who is not only rising above and transmuting his animal-like physical nature, but one who is aiming to reach divinity. His goal is heaven high. This image symbolizes also the link of the spiritual consciousness, which is brain-free and supraphysical, with the lower consciousness represented by the horse, the symbol for the intellect, the mode of consciousness dependent on the physical brain. Ideas and ideals are forged in this fiery sign of mental light and are made ready for reception by the intellect, creating spiritual intelligence thence to flow into daily living. As a result, the evolved Sagittarian realizes the illumination of the intellect by the light of the spirit, and in this fact, the time-space function of the brain becomes lightened by the Christ forces of truth and love. Thereby, this body, soul, and spirit of man are coordinated in the Sagittarian to such a degree that the intellect translates the heavenly light, so that the normal life of these natives is one of joyous, buoyant aspiration and perennial optimism. They have what might be called soul bounce. Through this, they are able to inspire others with goodwill and cheer, sparing no pains to bring healing and hope. They are completely confident, as was St. Paul, that, quote, all things work together for those that for good to them that love God. Romans 8:28. The symbol denotes the ego emerging from its animal-like state, taking on the shape of a noble form and erect posture, feeling the forces of the I am flowing through it and directing its aspiration towards the stars. The signal is a dual one, as are all the common mental signs, and in its best expression, it exhibits the delight of devotion, aspiring to live on earth with consciousness of the spiritual world, which vivid dreams and sometimes actual vision have made valid. When man has conquered or transmuted his desires, his life of feelings and emotions as a result of his life in the preceding sign, Scorpio, there can sound out of his soul the power of truth, for Sagittarius stands for the spirit of truth. In his epistle to the Romans, chapter 8, verses 5 through 9, St. Paul wrote about two kinds of mind. They that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. But ye that are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now, if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. The ideal is to spiritualize the earthly, physical personality, which is prone to materialism, and so to realize the work of Scorpio in its regenerative action, then to attain the goal of God through the spirit of truth. The spirit mind of Sagittarius is the mind of Christ truth. This very sensitive sign of the zodiac, along with the ninth house, indicates acute sensitivity and receptivity to states of spiritual cognition, whereby Sagittarians get the elevation and perspective which is cosmic or Christ-centered. All men at some point must reach the status of a Christed soul, and this occurs as man takes on the mind of Christ truth and translates in his body and brain the light of heavenly realms. This is the sign par excellence for this marvelous convergence of all types of consciousness to lift and light the soul and make the man not only more than an animal, but also more than an average human being. When the Christ mind lights the soul, we see in some phase and degree the manifestation of superior powers, for the bridge has been built between the earthly, physical, brain-bound man and the brain-free spiritual ego in touch with truth. Body, soul, and spirit are coordinated in the man who lives in the spirit-mind phase of Sagittarius. Hence, some element of creativity flowers, as well as the power of prophecy. Scorpio gives incisive insight. Sagittarius, expansiveness and foresight. Let us impress forcefully on our mind that the fact that until the intellect becomes illuminated and made spiritually intelligent, man remains bound to his moon-molded brain, which is selfish and separative. Thus, darkness reigns in varying degrees. It is Jupiter that prepares the soul to take in and use the Christ mind light. For Jupiter is the planet of cosmic thoughts and divine wisdom, and it is ruler of Sagittarius. When we have first brought clear thought to bear on a problem and have worked on it patiently, then Jupiter beings help us during sleep so that on waking we find a solution or grasp a new truth. If there is a sign calculated to take on the spirit mind of truth, it is indeed this ninth sign of the zodiac. The archer is the path of pure thinking, hence the acute mental spiritual acumen possessed by all evolved souls in this sign, which is extremely volatile. So extremely volatile is Sagittarius as a spiritual mental force, and so vast its velocity that whenever these natives still live in the lower phase of this sign, they become addicted to physical speed, and they make the high-speed records in athletics, in automobile racing, and in the air. In movement, the Sagittarians dart like an arrow and are fleet of foot, especially when this sign is on the eastern horizon of the nativity. They are fast, sprightly walkers, fond of hiking and mountain climbing. So when we're talking about the eastern horizon, that's the rising sign. When you look at the chart on the left-hand side, the rising sign, that is the eastern horizon where the sun rises, and it's your ascendant. Sagittarius rules the thighs and the pelvic region, especially the hips and the sciatic nerve, and some say the muscular system, all of which have much to do in the propelling of the body through space. When we understand the acute spiritual sensitivity of this ninth sign and the ninth house, we can see that few can make the grade demanded by its highest phase, for it shows the man become free of his lower nature, with the personality being used for Christ's sake. When the personal side is still stressed, the archer is given over to excessive activity and ruinous restlessness that can break down the physical body not accustomed to bear the higher mental spiritual currents. It is those who have not yet made their way to the domain of the spirit that resort to mere physical speed and seek to make and break records. The spiritual urge is diverted to physical use instead of being made to express the spirit mind. In any case, there must be ever be ascension and new peaks to climb. In connection with Sagittarius, we must observe the great love for the out of doors and for outdoor sports which it gives. Incidentally, we may note that it is primarily in the field of sports that the fine factor of fair play is known. This fact that the concept of fair play should prevail in sports and not in other departments of life deserves being pondered. Were fair play to be introduced into all human affairs, then we would have brotherhood much sooner. The idea of fair play and its realization emanate from this Jupiter-ruled sign. Although it extends only now to sports, it will increasingly reach out to all human affairs, to industrial, racial, governmental, national, and international relationships. Like Aries and Leo, the other fire signs, Sagittarius has extraordinary vitality. In Aries, it is as dynamic as Mars. In Leo, it is the very life of the sun. In Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, it is often sustained by one's spiritual being. Hence, Sagittarians continue on their way when many others have fallen by the wayside and dropped out of the race. That which is vital speaks of life. It connotes the liver, and no one could be a liver of life or move or think in a physical body without the warm arterial blood and the liver, which are ruled by Jupiter. What a vast network the arteries are, extending throughout the entire organism, providing channels of nourishment. As the blood makes its extensive journey through the arterial system, so the Sagittarian feels at home on all highways of the world. No place is too remote for this great adventurer. Assimilation, physical and spiritual growth could not take place without this benign planet of spiritual being, Jupiter, and its sensitive sign, Sagittarius. Those persons who are most pleasant with buoyancy of soul, the most sane with true optimism and joy, ungushing and real, are balanced Sagittarians. The reason for this buoyancy is that Jupiter also rules the two adrenal glands, which may be called poise producers. They turn the tide of flooding, morbid feelings and emotions, which have rise in the moon or in the forceful, discordant Mars or the gloomy, melancholic, and inhibitive Saturn. The action of the adrenals through Jupiter's rule pours power into the heart and to maintain the bloodstream against all insidious negation. Though Sagittarius is not the ruler of the heart, which is Leo's domain, it holds the key and the secret to that organ of love. For Jupiter furnishes the vital arterial blood to the heart, and we know that the blood is a very peculiar essence. No life is possible for man without the blood and a spiritual substance in which the Christ has vantage. Just as an engine without steam or gasoline remains inert and useless, or an electric motor dead without current, so man's heart would be lifeless without the blood supply. For the heart is not a pump, as is commonly supposed. Thus, there is a valid vital relation of the heart and Leo to the blood and Sagittarius. In the sphere of consciousness, Jupiter represents the divine mind and cosmic wisdom. To approach this wisdom, the intellect alone is inadequate, regardless of how indispensable it is in ordinary life, earthly life, and regardless of the marvelous advance it has wrought in the achievements of civilization. The Jupiter qualities of devotion and reverence are prerequisites if one is to advance toward an understanding of cosmic wisdom, thereby becoming spiritually intelligent. It is the sensitive sign of the centaur, the archer, that man transcends the light of the mere intellect and reaches out beyond the senses. When the illusory appearance of material existence is pierced, the truth is found that makes men free. Rightly does St. Paul say, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good, but what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Romans 12:2. With the advent of the radio, with the advent of the radio, there arose a new art, that of tuning in and listening in. This allusion to listening in on the radio is apt for the sign of Sagittarius, for it is in this power of the renewed mind, the Christ mind, that man, consciously or unconsciously, listens in to his higher spiritual being. To listen in this wise means no longer to conform to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of one's mind. Transformed by renewing one's mind, which then knows the will of God and attunes to the consciousness of the Christ, whose divine mind transcends one's intellect and informs one truthfully. Thus, as we grow in the soul evolution, we may take from Sagittarius this gift of God, which is true spiritual intelligence and the Christ consciousness, whose light in the spirit of truth and the wisdom of love, whose light is the spirit of truth and the wisdom of love. Then man's intellect no longer swamps him with error, fear, and falsity. This spiritual intelligence is the result of the intellect attuning itself and listening in to the spirit mind, the Christ mind. When this is achieved, man realizes the plan of God for mankind and for himself, and he treads the path. Now he travels consciously on the long, arduous evolutionary journey to ultimate Christhood. Indeed, Sagittarius beckons to higher goals, and the highest is complete Christhood. Human beings must grow in soul quality if they would evolve and grow in the sense of the spirit. For it is not merely a process of listening in that is involved, but right attunement and selection. Not all persons can take in the light which Sagittarius supplies to those who love God with deep devotion. Some are reckless and yield to the centaur's vice, which is rebelliousness, like that of the wild horse, and sometimes lawlessness, even to discarding all ethics. Others support and expound erroneous ideas and teachings. The sorry thing today is that many people still listen to the false promptings of the lower realms of the desire or soul world. Thus they live and move in selfishness and perpetuate systems that serve, quote, the prince of this world and not the Lord of love. In the first sign, Aries allows one to say, I am, and the fixed second fire sign, Leo, allows one to say, I will. So the building, thought maturing, mutable third fire sign, Sagittarius, allows one to say, I see the way that leads to a conscious goal. Sagittarius serves human evolution through the power of the renewed mind. Its exoteric keyword is I seek for food, whereas the esoteric keyword I see the goal. Thus, the Sagittarian must seek for food through various vicissitudes, come to a place where he can see the goal. One difference between Sagittarius and Gemini is this. Gemini knows not for certain where its many activities may lead, whereas Sagittarius has the inspiration and the inner confidence of a definite aim and goal that prompts him to action. The archer ever keeps his eyes on the goal. Without his thinking faculty, man remains animal-like. So long, however, as the thinking is limited to materialistic concepts, it remains grounded. Man does not see his divine goal and does not attain to that elevation that extends his horizons to include spirit realms with their cosmic perspective. Observe the truth of these words taken from the old commentary and how they relate to Sagittarius. Quote, the sons of God shot forth like arrows from the bow. The forms received the impulse of mind, and lo, a God was born. The tiny babe knew not the great event. End quote. Few as yet know of the cosmic goal that lies ahead of man's long future evolutionary journey. Those who see the goal know that man himself is to become a cosmic being, not in the materialistic sense of space travel as an astronaut, but as a cosmic creator in the spiritual process of world becoming. Not until a sufficient number of people come to know the mightiness of the mind illumined by the higher Christ mind light will mankind find its true place, and will fear be banished. A flood of feeling swamps people in times of crisis. Yet out of the very sorrows of the earth is the new orientation taking place that makes men and women see the real and approach the truth. This meditation is written with one major purpose in view: to contribute to a new orientation of mind and soul, so that those who read might realize the boundless potential of the renewed mind, the spirit mind that attunes one to the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Romans 12:2. the direct idea in the evolution of man and earth. Once the spirit mind is known and active in the soul, the flooding force of fear or feeling and the pain become neutralized or canceled. The Christ mind can never be fear-filled. It can never be found wanting in presence of mind or in calm penetration of all situations of life. For without some degree of this Christ mind, there is bound to be in man an immense imbalance, which amounts to what many may call insanity. Without this Christ mind, many journeys through life without proper direction. Let me go back here. Without this Christ mind, man journeys through life without proper direction and lacks the divine goal that the archer confers. Let us look at Sagittarius in the light of the law of the Lord. Then we shall see why few can express its positive power so high and holy. Most souls are not by any means clear of the subtle and often loathsome toils of their insidious personalities. To seek the higher life and not to surrender the personality wholly to the law of God, which is one's destiny as duty, is to court danger of no mean kind. For when spiritual and occult work is commenced without the purity of purpose, the lower forces are stirred up in the person, and he can with ease descend along the left-hand path. When one obeys the call and command of his own destiny without hate, heat, sorrow, or resentment, then that soul is truly philosophical. Sagittarius produces a mind given to philosophy. Not all Sagittarians are devoted, yet when this quality of devotion is joined to philosophy, we observe that beautiful phenomenon of a man truly religious, an individual in love, with love, and literally embodying him in himself and in his daily deeds the law or will of God. Would that there were many more such souls on earth today to raise it sooner to Christ height. One such soul was Abraham Lincoln, who had Sagittarius rising with Saturn and Neptune conjunct the ascendant. True vision that makes a man a seer and a prophet comes out of a soul that loves truth and honesty, marked traits of Abraham Lincoln, who earned for himself the sobriquet Honest Abe. His apt anecdotes, always on tap, clearly reveal that he was a Sagittarian philosopher. Another strong influence of this sign manifested in his ability to dream true dreams. Thus did he foresee his own death. Sagittarius, like Gemini, is strong in speech but weak in silence or listening. The Sagittarian, having what amounts to clairvoyant thought, is loath to hear one through to the end of the sentence or statement, for he knows beforehand what the speaker has in mind. So would he spare and cut short the speech of others, even though this often annoys. It is because of this clairvoyant thought faculty, along with a free, frank, outspoken, and straightforward expression, in contrast to Scorpio's secretiveness and a large sense of detachment, the result of an unconscious sense of the universal, that the Sagittarian so often uses words as darts, hitting what is false and weak in others. He knows the vulnerable vulnerable spots in the human character and exposes them, which as often disturbs and or destroys the dignity of people who live only in their personalities. So detached and yet attached to a sense of truth are Sagittarians that they actually intend no hurt in their outspokenness, exposing what is false in others. It is done simply to unmask the little personal lives of others so that the light of spirit truth and the level of the universal might be sought and secured. Thus, they instinctively search for and espouse the truth and easily detect lies and errors, calling for adjustment, much as water seeks its own level. Although the archer never misses his mark because of the clairvoyant quality of his thought, no one is more sensitive than he to harsh words, which wound him far more severely than physical blows. And no more righteous indignation is seen than that exploded by Sagittarians in a veritable torrential velocity. Well, I do remember one whom I had made conversant with the truth that the spirit of man is eternal. It exists before birth and after death, and that reincarnation is a reality. She gave rent to fiery indignation because the church to which she had always belonged did not teach this truth about the reincarnating ego. The souls of most Sagittarians are moved in an unconscious, if not conscious, manner by the intuitional forces of the light of truth that is beyond and above the brain organism. As a result, idealism is constantly carried as a current. Because of this lofty quality of mind and ideals, Sagittarians not only resent innuendos and accusations that would not cause a ripple of comment from other sign members, they are aroused to a fury of righteous anger in the degree in which their ideals have been degraded. As the natives of the fixed bestial signs, Taurus and Scorpio, ruling the creative voice forces and the generative organs, tend to abuse the sex function and to squander sex forces so that they must seek to transmute their desires. So do the natives of the two signs following these fixed signs, the common signs, Gemini and Sagittarius, wantonly waste their vocal forces in irrelevant and incessant speech, often mere garrulous chatter. To those intimate with the forces of the zodiac, it is seen that the natives of these two mental signs must seek to conserve and control the forces of speech so that the innate wisdom of love may flower. Sagittarians are fond of all forms of racing and need to be on their guard lest their tongue, too, run a race. One of the chief exercises they should set forward for themselves is to bridle or control the tongue, thus making speech a feeling for truth. Not until one dimly realizes the speed of the spirit, or better, the all-permeability of the spirit, can one understand the immense mutability and defatigable activity of Sagittarius, which often leads to ruinous restlessness in the undeveloped souls in this sign, for it produces an inner speed that presses the body on beyond endurance. It is the spiritual pressure within that makes these natives seek for food, and after seeking, see the goal, for they have an innate hunger for the spiritual worlds. unless they live wholly in their personality, the carnal mind, and are moved by selfish ambition rather than by aspiration. It is this pressure bearing down on the personality that produces love for travel, especially for long journeys and voyages, which are ruled by this sign, as well as for cosmopolitan concepts and an interest in foreign countries and peoples from whom they usually gain great benefits. Snobbery is not the vice of these open-minded, free, expansive individuals, even though they are fully aware of enormous inequalities in evolutionary progress. Although they are tolerant, they have little patience with narrow-minded views. Sagittarius must be realized in the sense of its vast expansiveness, for it is as wide as the world and needs plenty of space for its activities. It will give a will to conquer new worlds, to open new areas of thought, and to acquire an ever-expanding consciousness. With a consciousness as universal as that conferred by this sign, it is small wonder that Sagittarians show such a large sense of freedom and independence. This is also the result of the expansive Jupiter. In the soul of the Sagittarian there dwells, either consciously or unconsciously, the innate realization of his sonship with God, and this idea, dream, or vision, no matter how vague, is carried within as a constant craving to be at some time satisfied. This sign rules religion, hence Sagittarians have a natural sense of religious intelligence and are for the most part the pillars of the church. Ministers are often strong in the archer, whose upward directed arrow symbolizes aspiration to divine purpose. As Sagittarius rules the sense of taste, its natives will be moved to manifest a compassion in the degree in which they have tasted of the Lord. In a world built up by critical, egoistic, and separative forces, criticism is condoned and accepted. However, although spiritually aware and serving the Christ, therefore making the lunar forces serve the solar light, know what a vice gossip is and how it is made worse by the press that panders to it. Were the world to cease worrying and cease holding spite and malice through gossiping, and were it no more to have curiosity about the concerns of others, then friendship would flourish. In virtue of their love of fair play and their worldwide interest, evolved Sagittarians are not addicted to worrying, nor concerned about other people's affairs in the sense of curiosity or of purveying malicious gossip or talk. With the unevolved, it may be otherwise. To know the forces of every sign of the zodiac, and thus to be all things to all men, to know how to abound and how to be unbased in the manner of St. Paul, implies a close intimacy with the plan of God and establishes this knowledge of soul and spirit through the variety and vicissitudes of many lives. Many secretly or openly declare their wishes to be teachers, but only those devoted to God in heart and mind and in soul, who have taken the impress and impulse of Jupiter through the sign of Sagittarius, can ever hope to be true teachers of men, no matter whether their present nativities show planets in this sign or not. For to be fit and able to teach in the sense of the Christ, the teacher at some time must have acquired the touch and the wisdom provided by Jupiter. The Sagittarian or Jupiterian teacher is much desired, for he has that inborn empathy that knows the individual need of the pupil. He does not teach by telling. He is the true educator because he educes, draws out answers from the pupil, who thereby learns to think for himself. He educes the teacher within the pupil. Moreover, the teachers in this sign lack the prejudice that is all too common in teachers, and with such a rare fragrance, for perfume it is to be without such fault. A rapport can readily be established between teacher and pupil. This is essential if teaching is to have an educative effect. All those who would serve the world and themselves in true redemption and thus salvage souls must have the expansive, all-embracing forces of Jupiter. Each triplicity of the zodiac gives flow and force to some quality of consciousness. There are 4 triplicities and 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. The earth signs call out that condition of consciousness that is connected with physical reality. The perfection of physical experiences is the result of wise life in these signs. The water signs bring man the realization of the consciousness concerned with the feelings and sensations, so that the imaginative forces become perfected and amenable to the spirit. The air signs bring about an expansion of consciousness through thought and mental forces, so that the human being as a soul is seen apart and distinct from the sensual, physical, personal man. In air signs, man comes to consolidate thinking, and through concentration in thinking, he brings maturity to the wisdom that may lead to a knowledge of God. The design of man's divinity is realized through the avenue of the air signs. The fire signs confer the kind of consciousness that affects the will to be, and that makes man say, I am that I am. Out of the fire signs comes the dynamic directing idea. In the first fire sign, Aries, man's consciousness is riotous unless it is given direction. Its marked feature is rash, wild, outflying impulse, and a mind instinctive with spontaneity. Riotous rapidity that leads to excess is the mode of Aries whenever there is no fully self-directed consciousness. In the fixed fire sign, Leo, the power of will accompanies the self-consciousness. The characteristic consciousness of Aries is transmuted and matured in Leo till harmony and stability result, head and heart being balanced and cooperating. The power that nourishes and sustains the soul stems from the vital generative forces of Leo. As man's consciousness is differentiated in Aries and brought into a state of harmony in Leo, these forces are resolved into that distillate of mental force in Sagittarius that brings release to the light of heaven. In this sign of the mind spirit, a spirit mind, where the only guide and one teacher may be found, the Christ, who is the law and its fulfillment, there takes place the sublimation of consciousness and the perfection, which are the fruit of right transmutation. Evolution provides the power to progress by ever taking on the new. Sagittarius promotes the sublimation of the soul by correlating the intellect, which the spirit mind, and through this union and transmutation, a bridge is built from the brain-bound personality living in its physical form to the higher spiritual being and to that spiritual realm that is the source of all ideas. Thus, the Sagittarian is a prophet, and these souls, when evolved and Christ elect, may reach into the realms of real religion, art, truth, and tone, where the poetry of the one philosophy eternally pulses in the divine rhythm of God. Through such artistic creativity, Beethoven set down his symphonies, for he had Sun, Moon, and Mercury in Sagittarius. His contemporary Joseph Haydn, another master composer, had Sagittarius rising, with Uranus therein, and also the dynamic Mars. The marked features of the Sagittarian may be discerned in the last of the long line of musicians, Carl Maria von Weber, who so brilliantly expressed in tone the ethereal of the ethereal of the fairy world and what the world calls romanticism in his Oberon, Der Freischütz, and other works, especially in his Invitation to the Dance. In this freedom-loving, fiery sign of the seer, we see the marked mode of the spirit-mind consciousness that connects one with truth through the mind of Christ, and this in the degree provided by the soul's purity, aspiration, and devotion. The spirit mind manifests through the higher being called by St. Paul, the Lord from heaven, which then expresses in the personality, but not till the personality is subordinated and consecrated to God can the Christ mind appear. For most people to acquire the mind which was in Christ Jesus, the lessons are long and the journey arduous. The Sagittarian is the seer of the goal, and his is the elevation that forever allows a further expansion of consciousness and the vision of still more distant goals. Once the goal is reached, another is seen. In fact, this is the sign wherein the forces of relationship move upward in the evolutionary expansion, for Sagittarius relates one to the Christ truth and the teacher within, working as a leaven to realize the onward advance, the soul progressive journey. This occurs as a result of the right relationship, the linking of the intellect with the sense-free spirit working in the soul. It has been truly said by a prophet, quote, "Where there is no vision, the people perish," end quote. The quality of true vision animates the Sagittarian, who is mature, balanced, and evolved, as was Abraham Lincoln. The evolved Sagittarian strives for perfect perspective by securing views that portray the widest possible picture, floodlighted by the spirit. He may spend years of his life in reaching a goal, only to see another, for truth is infinite and moves forward forever forward and upward. Thus we see why Sagittarius gives inspiration and aspiration, an eternal spiraling journey, and why those who are negative in this sign move simply in vicious circles rather than ascending spirals of an ever forward and upward evolution. Let food be sought the sheep to feed. Who would be pastor knows the need. Who would God's highest riches reap, lives in the light and feeds his sheep. How few have yet truth realized, engrossed, enamored, hypnotized by earthly forces and the form, which separate and bring the storm. To love the truth is Christ to know, and his is the life and way to go. If you would know the truth that frees, then learn of him, he holds the keys. All those who seek shall find the way, which brings return upon the ray of Christ, who is the loving whole, for all mankind the living goal. And that concludes the chapter on Sagittarius, the Archer, from the book Meditations on the Signs of the Zodiac by John Jocelyn. Available on Kindle.